We all want our kids to succeed in school, right?
Hmm.
But sometimes it feels like you're hitting a wall. You
Yeah.
know your child is bright, you see the potential there, but something just isn't clicking.
Exactly.
Well, what if I told you that the missing piece of the puzzle might be something you haven't even considered? Like how their brain processes sound.
It's more common than you think. I talk to parents all the time, and they come to me so frustrated, because their child is struggling. But they're bright, they're capable,
Right.
but school is just this constant uphill battle.
Yeah. Okay. So let's break this down a little bit. What exactly is auditory processing?
Well, auditory processing is basically what happens in the brain after the ears actually pick up sound.
Okay.
It's really about making sense of that sound,
Okay.
not just hewing it.
So are you saying that a child could have perfect hearing but still have trouble with auditory processing?
Absolutely.
Hmm.
Think of it this way. Your child's ears, they might be receiving the teacher's instructions loud and clear, right? But their brain struggles to actually organize and interpret and then use that information effectively.
Oh, so it's like a disconnect between the ears and the brain.
Exactly.
Huh.
Yeah.
So how does that actually play out in a child's everyday life, though?
It can impact so many areas,
I bet.
even something as basic as reading.
Hmm.
So when a child is learning to read, they need to connect letters to sounds.
Right.
And that whole process, phonics, relies heavily on strong auditory processing skills.
So if their brain isn't processing those sounds accurately, it's going to make it that much harder to learn to read.
Exactly.
Would
They
mo-
might, mix up similar sounding words,
Okay.
like big and dig, or struggle to sound out new words.
Okay.
Their spelling might be inconsistent.
That makes sense.
And then, these challenges affect reading comprehension.
Right, because
Easily.
it just builds, right?
Yeah.
Like if they can't get those basic sounds, then everything that builds on that is going to be off.
Exactly.
So it would be really easy to overlook this.
Right.
As a parent or as a teacher, you might think it's a reading issue when it's really this underlying auditory processing challenge.
Exactly. And it's not just reading. Auditory processing is crucial for math, too.
Really?
Math.
Math too.
I wouldn't have thought of that.
Yeah.
I mean, how does that work? How does auditory processing come into play with math?
Well, I mean, think about it.
Okay.
Following, multi-step instructions to solve a problem, remembering number sequences,
Right. Yeah.
understanding math vocabulary.
It's all auditory.
Right.
Yeah.
All of these rely on auditory processing. Even word problems, which are often seen as like a reading issue,
Okay.
those depend on the ability to process and interpret that auditory information accurately.
Wow. So you're saying that this one skill can impact so many different areas of learning?
It really is a foundational skill.
Yeah.
And then you have like even the simple act of following instructions,
Yes.
right? Like you ask your kid to put their shoes on, get their backpack,
Right.
and meet you at the door.
Right.
But they only do like part of the task.
Yeah.
Or they seem to completely zone out.
Totally. And it's easy to think they're being defiant or they're not paying attention.
Exactly.
Right.
And maybe they're not.
Right. But for a child with auditory processing difficulties, it could be that their brain is just struggling to process all those instructions at once,
Okay.
or they're getting distracted by, background noise.
That makes sense. Like they're missing pieces of the puzzle, even though they're trying their best to keep up.
Exactly. And this can have a huge impact on their social interactions, too.
Oh, of course.
Yeah. I mean, imagine trying to follow a conversation in a noisy cafeteria or on the playground.
Right.
For a child with auditory processing issues, that can feel super overwhelming. They might miss social cues, misunderstand jokes, or just withdraw from interactions because it's too much effort to keep up.
So not only are they struggling academically, but socially too.
Yeah.
That's got to be really tough.
And often these struggles are misunderstood, even misdiagnosed.
Wait, are you saying that auditory processing issues can be mistaken for something else entirely?
Yeah.
Like what?
Well, because the symptoms often overlap.
Okay.
Auditory processing difficulties are often mistaken for things like ADHD
Okay.
or autism spectrum disorder, even anxiety or oppositional defiant disorder.
Wow.
The child might be fidgety, inattentive, or easily frustrated.
Right.
But the underlying cause is really their struggle to process sound effectively.
That's a scary thought
Yeah.
because a child could be receiving treatment for the wrong thing.
Exactly.
When the real issue is how their brain is processing sound.
Exactly. And that's why it's so important for parents to be aware of the signs
Right.
of auditory processing difficulties so they can advocate for their child and ensure they get the appropriate support.
So let's talk about those signs. What should parents be looking for if they suspect their child might be struggling with auditory processing?
Well, there are many things to look for. But some of the most common signs are, difficulty following those multi-step instructions, frequently asking what, even when the instructions were given clearly, and struggling to understand speech when there's a lot of background noise.
Now that you mention it, I can see how some of those behaviors could easily be mistaken for other things, like inattention or even defiance.
Oh, absolutely. And that's why it's so important to consider auditory processing as a possible explanation.
Okay.
It's not about labeling, or jumping to conclusions,
Yeah.
but about being aware of all the factors that could be contributing to their struggles.
So let's say a parent notices some of these signs in their child. What's the next step?
The first step is to talk to your child's pediatrician or their teacher.
Okay.
They can help you rule out other possibilities like hearing loss or a learning disability
Okay.
and refer you to a specialist for further evaluation.
Okay, so we're talking about an audiologist.
Exactly, an audiologist who specializes in auditory processing.
Okay.
They can actually conduct a really thorough assessment
Okay.
to see if your child is having trouble with these skills.
And then what?
And then based on the assessment, they can recommend specific strategies and interventions.
To kind of address those challenges.
Exactly.
Okay. Before we jump into solutions, though, I think it's important to break down what auditory processing actually involves.
Yeah.
Right, so can you explain the different components that make up this complex skill?
Sure. Auditory processing is not just one monolithic skill.
Okay.
It's actually a combination of several abilities working together.
Okay.
There are 4 key components: auditory discrimination,
Okay.
auditory figure ground discrimination, auditory memory, and auditory closure.
Okay. Let's break those down one by one. Starting with auditory discrimination. What exactly is that?
Auditory discrimination is the ability to differentiate between similar sounds. Think about like 15 and 50, or bat and pat.
Right.
For a child with weak auditory discrimination, those subtle differences are hard to hear,
Oh, okay.
and that can impact their ability to learn phonics,
Right.
to spell correctly, even understand spoken language clearly.
So their ears are picking up the sounds, but their brain has trouble actually telling the difference.
Precisely. Now, let's move on to auditory figure ground discrimination.
Okay.
This is the ability to focus on a specific sound
Okay.
while filtering out background noise.
So it's like being able to hear your friend's voice in a crowded room.
Exactly.
Or understand the teacher's instructions, even with, all the noise of the classroom in the background.
Exactly. I mean, imagine your child trying to listen to you read a bedtime story
Okay.
while their siblings playing a video game in the next room. If their auditory figure ground discrimination is weak, they're going to struggle to focus on your voice
Yeah.
and understand the story.
I could see how that would be really frustrating for everyone involved.
Absolutely. And it often goes unnoticed because it looks like the child just isn't paying attention.
Yeah. Okay, let's talk about auditory memory now. What exactly is that, and how does it affect learning?
Auditory memory is basically the ability to hold on to auditory information
Okay.
long enough to process and use it.
Okay.
So it's what allows us to, remember instructions, follow conversations, learn new information.
Okay.
For a child with weak auditory memory, remembering a sequence of instructions like
Right.
go to your room, get your shoes, and meet me at the door can feel impossible.
Right, so it's not that they're not listening.
Right.
It's that their brain just can't hold on to all that information.
Exactly. And that can impact their ability to learn new vocabulary,
Right.
follow classroom discussions, even participate in games.
Okay, so all of these skills are really interconnected.
They are.
Now, let's talk about that last one, auditory closure.
Yeah.
What is that, and why is that so important?
Well, auditory closure is the ability to fill in missing pieces of auditory information. Think about, understanding someone on a bad phone connection.
Right.
Or someone who has a really strong accent.
Right.
Our brains are constantly filling in the gaps based on, context and prior knowledge.
So for a child with weak auditory closure, even a slight distortion or interruption in sound could make it difficult to understand what's being said.
Exactly. They might constantly ask people to repeat themselves,
Oh, okay.
have trouble understanding idioms or figurative language,
Okay.
or miss important details in conversations.
This is also fascinating, but I'm wondering how these auditory processing skills connect to other things that we hear so much about,
Okay.
like working memory
Right.
and executive function.
Yeah.
How do those all kind of work together?
Well, working memory, which is basically the ability to hold and manipulate information in your mind, relies heavily on auditory processing. So when your child is trying to solve a math problem, follow those multi-step instructions or even participate in a conversation, they're relying on their working memory,
Right.
which is constantly using those auditory processing skills.
Okay.
And then you have executive function, which is like planning, organization, self-regulation.
Yeah.
That's also really intertwined with auditory processing.
Okay.
So being able to filter out distractions,
Okay.
prioritize tasks, monitor your own progress,
Right.
all depends on the ability to process auditory information effectively.
So it's like when a child is struggling with auditory processing, it's not just one skill that's affected. It's impacting their entire ability to learn and function.
That's exactly right.
This is a lot to take in, but where do parents begin to address these challenges?
You're right. It can feel overwhelming.
Yeah.
But the good news is there are lots of effective interventions available
Okay, good.
to support children with auditory processing difficulties.
Okay, so we'll dive into those solutions and how parents can actually help their kids develop these skills in part 2.
So we've talked about what auditory processing is and some of the challenges it can create, but now the question is, what can you do about it?
That's the big question, right? What can parents actually do to help their kids?
Well, the first thing to remember is you are your child's greatest advocate. You know them best. You're in the perfect position to support them.
Okay, I love that starting point. It's so empowering for parents. But what does that look like, practically speaking? What can we actually do at home?
Well, one of the simplest things you can do is create a listening-friendly environment at home.
Okay.
So that means reducing background noise as much as possible, especially during homework time or when you're giving instructions.
So turning off the TV, maybe closing the windows to minimize any outside sounds.
Exactly. You can even use like a white noise machine or some soft music
Oh,
to
good.
create a more calming atmosphere.
That makes sense. Just setting the stage for successful listening?
Exactly. And when you are talking to your child, make sure you have their attention before you start speaking.
Right.
Get down to their level, make eye contact, and use clear and concise language.
So instead of just shouting instructions from across the house,
Yeah.
actually take the time to connect.
Right. It sounds simple, but it can make a world of difference. And don't be afraid to repeat yourself,
Oh,
but
well.
do it in a way that helps them process the information.
Okay. What do you mean?
So instead of just saying the same sentence over and over again, rephrase it or break it down into smaller chunks.
Okay. Got it. That makes more sense than just repeating the same thing over and over.
Exactly. And another powerful tool you have is play.
Play.
There are so many games you can play.
Oh, fun.
Activities that help develop auditory processing skills in a way that's fun and engaging.
I love that. Play is such a natural way for kids to learn. Can you give us some examples of games that parents can play with their kids?
Absolutely. So for auditory discrimination, you can play rhyming games, sound bingo. You could even just have them close their eyes and identify different sounds around the house.
That's a good one. What about auditory figure ground discrimination?
Yeah.
Are there games for that too?
Yeah, you can have them listen to a story with some background noise playing
Okay.
and then ask them questions about what they heard.
Oh, okay.
Or you can play Simon Says with multiple instructions to challenge their ability to focus on your voice amidst distractions.
I like it. Those sound like a lot of fun, and they seem like they'd be really effective. What about auditory memory?
Well, for that, games like Telephone are great,
Mm.
where you whisper a sentence around a circle.
Yeah.
I went on a picnic where you add an item to the list each turn. Those are fantastic for auditory memory.
Those are classics.
You could also do memory matching games, but with sounds instead of pictures.
Oh, clever. These are all great. I love how they're so easy to just fit into everyday life. What about auditory closure? Any games for that?
Oh, yeah. You could play fill in the blank by leaving out words in a sentence. Or a story and have them guess what's missing.
Oh, fun.
Or you can have them listen to a song or a rhyme with missing words and try to fill them in.
So there are a lot of opportunities to turn everyday activities into learning experiences.
Exactly. And the key is to make it fun and engaging. The more your child enjoys the activities, the more likely they are to really benefit from them.
That makes sense. But for parents who are just starting to understand all of this, it can be a bit overwhelming. Are there programs or resources out there that can provide more structured support?
Oh, for sure. And that's why I often recommend the Attentive Year program.
Right. We mentioned this earlier. Can you tell us a little bit more about what makes it so effective?
Sure. So the Attentive Ear program is a research-backed online intervention,
Okay.
and it's designed specifically to improve auditory processing skills in children.
Okay.
It provides a structured, systematic approach
Okay.
through these really engaging activities and games that target each of those four key components we discussed.
So it takes some of the guesswork out of it for parents and gives them a clear path to follow.
Exactly. And what's really great about this program is that it's short and manageable.
Okay, that's important.
Only 15 minutes a day can make a significant difference.
Wow, 15 minutes, that's doable.
It
You
is.
could fit that in before school, after dinner, even in the car.
Exactly. And because it's online, you can access it from anywhere.
Oh, that's helpful. So we've talked about games and activities, but what do those 15 minutes actually look like with the Attentive Ear program? What are the specific exercises?
So there are a wide variety of exercises in the program, but let's say your child is working on auditory discrimination.
Yeah.
They might listen to pairs of words
Okay.
and have to identify whether they're the same or different.
Okay.
Or they might hear a series of sounds and have to pick out a specific target sound.
So it's really training their ears to pick up on those subtle differences.
Exactly. And if they're working on auditory figure ground discrimination, they might listen to a story or instructions with some background noise playing, challenging them to focus on that main sound.
That's perfect for those kids who struggle to concentrate in noisy environments.
Exactly. For auditory memory, they might listen to a list of words or instructions and then have to repeat them back.
Okay.
Or they might have to follow a series of directions that get a little bit more complex as they go.
That's a great way to work that working memory muscle.
Exactly. And then for auditory closure, they might have to complete sentences where some words are missing or they're distorted,
Okay.
or guess a word based on a partial auditory cue.
So all of these are really designed to mimic real-life situations where kids need to use those auditory processing skills.
That's one of the best things about the program. It's not just about rote memorization, it's about building those real-world skills.
I love that. It's all very intentional. I'm curious, is this for any age?
While it can be helpful for kids of all ages, it's particularly effective for those between 5 and 12,
Okay.
because that's a really critical time for auditory processing development.
Got it. So not too late to start if your child is already in elementary school, but the earlier the better.
Exactly. And the program adapts to different learning styles and paces. Kids can work through the exercises at their own speed.
Okay.
They can repeat them if they need to.
That's good so that everyone can really benefit no matter their individual learning needs. What about cost?
That's a great question. Cost is always a concern for parents, but Attentive Ear is actually priced significantly lower than a lot of other auditory processing interventions,
That's great.
making it more accessible.
That's good to hear.
Yeah. And they also offer a free trial so parents can try it out first.
Oh, perfect.
Yeah.
See if it's a good fit for their child before committing.
Exactly. Do you need any special equipment or materials?
That was going to be my next question.
No, not at all. All you need is a device with internet and a pair of headphones. Exercises are audio-based, so you don't need any special software or anything fancy.
That's great. So easy for parents to get started.
And there's also a guide for parents with tips and strategies.
Oh, nice.
So you can support your child at home.
So it's really more than just the exercises. It's giving parents the information they need to be part of the process.
Exactly. The Attentive Ear program is about empowering parents and giving them the tools to help their kids succeed.
I love that. This has been so helpful. I feel like we've given parents a lot of hope and some concrete steps they can take
I hope so. It's really all about giving kids the support they need.
to reach their full potential.
Exactly.
And that's a perfect segue to the final part of our deep dive, where we'll explore those benefits. So we've talked about what auditory processing is and how it can be misdiagnosed and how it affects a child's ability to learn, to follow directions, to interact with others.
We have, and we've talked about the importance of early intervention
Yes.
and all the different strategies and programs that are out there to help.
Yeah.
Now I think it's time to look at the bigger picture.
Okay.
The long-term impact of improving auditory processing skills.
Right, because it's not just about, making school a little easier.
Right.
It's about giving your child skills that will benefit them for their whole life.
Absolutely.
I think that's what's so exciting about this topic.
it is.
We're talking about unlocking a child's potential.
Exactly. When kids develop strong auditory processing skills, it really does open up a world of possibilities for them. They can learn more effectively,
Right.
they can communicate more confidently,
Yes.
and they can engage more fully in everything around them.
Let's start with academics. We talked about how auditory processing affects reading, spelling, and math. But what are the long-term academic benefits of improving those skills?
Well, when a child can process auditory information efficiently, they're going to be able to, absorb and retain information much easier in the classroom. They can follow the teacher's instructions.
Yeah.
They can understand those complex, they get the jokes, the sarcasm.
Yeah.
They pick up on those social cues, and all of that leads to stronger friendships,
Right.
better communication skills,
It really does.
and a greater sense of belonging.
It's amazing to think that something as, I don't know, basic as how our brains process sound can have such a big impact on a child's social and emotional well-being.
It really can. And those positive social interactions, those feelings of connection, of belonging, are crucial for their emotional development, their mental health. It helps them develop self-esteem,
Right.
resilience, and a sense of belonging.
What's really resonating with me is this ripple effect. Improving auditory processing skills isn't just addressing this one little thing. It has this positive impact on so many different areas of a child's life.
It really does. It's about giving them the tools they need to thrive.
Yes.
In school, in relationships, in life. And the best part is, parents, you have the power to make a difference.
I love that. It's so empowering. So to wrap things up, what's the one key takeaway you want parents to leave with today?
I would say, remember, you're not alone. There are resources out there. And with the right support, your child can overcome these challenges and achieve some pretty amazing things.
That's a great message to end on. Thank you so much for joining us today and sharing your expertise with us.
It's been my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
And to our listeners, thank you for joining us on this journey of discovery. We'll be back next time with another deep dive into a topic that matters to parents. Until then, keep learning, keep growing, and keep supporting those amazing kids.